Police officers arrive at a grand family home in the city of Poitiers. The Monniers are well-respected, wealthy, influential, a family with everything to lose. But what the officers are about to uncover inside this house will shock not just the neighborhood, but all of France. Behind locked shutters, in a dark and filthy attic room, lies a woman no one has seen for decades. Her body is skeletal, wasted almost to the bone. Her long hair hangs in dirty clumps, her skin pale from years without sunlight. She is surrounded by rot, filth, and the unbearable stench of human neglect. And yet, she is alive. This is the story of Blanche Monnier, a beautiful young woman once admired for her charm and grace, who vanished at the age of 25. For 25 years, she was hidden away, imprisoned not by strangers, but by her own family, a punishment for nothing more than falling in love with the wrong man. Subscribe to True Dark Chapter so more of these stories can be told and more lives protected. Blanche Monnier was born in 1849 into one of the most respectable families of Poitiers, France. The Monniers were wealthy, influential, and deeply concerned with appearances. In that era, family honor was everything, and for a young woman like Blanche, her role was clear. Marry well, secure the family's reputation, and never bring shame to their name. By the 1870s, Blanche seemed destined for a bright future. She was admired across town, a striking young woman with elegance, intelligence, and a graceful charm that drew attention wherever she went. Many believed she would marry into nobility, perhaps even rise higher in society. But Blanche's heart led her down a different path. She met him, an older lawyer, through her social circle in Poitiers. He was not wealthy, not noble, but carried himself with quiet dignity. He spoke with intelligence and treated her with a gentleness she had never found in the arrogant suitors her mother paraded before her. Where others saw Blanche only as a beautiful daughter of a noble family, he saw her as a person. He admired her wit, her mind, and her courage to speak openly. At first, it was harmless. Polite conversations at gatherings, brief exchanges in town. But soon, Blanche found herself lingering longer in his company, seeking excuses to see him. Their meetings grew more private, walks in shaded gardens, hushed talks at street corners, always glancing over their shoulders. For Blanche, it was intoxicating. The lawyer offered her something no wealthy suitor could: love that was simple, sincere, and free of calculation. He didn't care about her family's name, he cared about her. But Poitiers was a small city, and small cities thrive on whispers. By 1874, rumors began to circulate, rumors of Blanche's affection for a man far beneath her rank. At first, it was just gossip among neighbors, but soon those whispers reached the Monnier household. Her family, proud, aristocratic, obsessed with appearances, was horrified. When by 1876, the whispers of Blanche's forbidden love finally reached the Monnier household, and the reaction was immediate and merciless. Her mother, Louise Monnier, was a woman feared even within her own family. Proud, domineering, and obsessed with social status, she could not bear the thought of her daughter throwing away a noble future for a penniless lawyer. To Louise, this was not love. It was betrayal. She demanded Blanche end the relationship, but Blanche refused. At first, Louise tried persuasion, then threats. When nothing worked, she made her decision. One evening in 1876, Blanche was led into a small upstairs room. The shutters were nailed shut, the door locked. She was told she would remain there until she came to her senses, and she did not step out again. Louise's iron grip was not the only force keeping Blanche inside. Her brother, Marcel Monnier, a respected academic, lived in the same house. He knew what was happening. He heard the cries. He saw the scraps of food carried upstairs. Yet he did nothing. Whether out of fear of his mother or loyalty to family honor, Marcel became her silent jailer. And so Blanche was abandoned not just by a cruel mother, but by a brother who chose silence over saving. At first, Blanche believed her captivity would be brief, perhaps a few days, perhaps a few weeks. Surely her mother would relent. Surely her family would not let her waste away behind closed doors. But the days stretched into months. Months bled into years. And still the shutters stayed nailed shut. The door stayed locked. The room became her entire world. Small, suffocating, and foul. With no sunlight, the air grew damp, heavy, and stale. Vermin scurried across the floor. Her bed was a rotting mattress, soaked and crawling with filth. Food came in scraps, just enough to keep her alive but never enough to keep her strong. Slowly, her body weakened, wasting away into skin and bone. The elegant young woman once admired in Poitiers was now a ghost. Her hair grew long, matted, and tangled. Her skin turned sickly pale, almost gray from decades without sunlight. And then there was the silence. She had no voice to comfort her, no friend to confide in, no hope of rescue, only the creak of footsteps above her head, the sound of rats in the corners, and the endless blackness of the room. Her mother, Louise, commanded the punishment, but it was her brother, Marcel Monnier, who ensured it continued. Meanwhile, outside the house, the Monniers maintained their perfect facade. They told neighbors Blanche had chosen a life of seclusion. Others heard she had entered a convent. Some were told she was too sick to be seen. In 19th-century polite society, no one dared pry too deeply into the affairs of a respected family. Her lover, the man she had risked everything for, searched and waited. But by the mid-1880s, his hope faded. He died around 1885, never knowing the truth. Blanche had not abandoned him. She had been erased by her own family. And so, for 25 long years, Blanche Monnier lived sealed away in darkness, alive but buried from the world. The Monnier home stood quietly on the Rue de la Visitation in Poitiers, a grand, respectable house belonging to one of the city's most prominent families. On the surface, nothing seemed unusual. Curtains drawn, doors locked, the family living in apparent dignity. But that morning, police officers arrived at the property acting on a disturbing tip. The family greeted them with surprise and indignation. Madame Louise Monnier, elderly but still imposing, insisted there had been some mistake. Her son Marcel backed her up, politely but firmly, as if their family's reputation alone should have been enough to dismiss suspicion. Yet something felt wrong. The officers noted a foul odor, heavy and unmistakable, seeping through the upstairs hallways. It grew stronger as they approached a locked, shuttered room. The family hesitated, tried to redirect the investigators, but the police pressed forward. When they forced the door open, the sight inside froze them in horror. The room was dark, the shutters nailed shut. The air was suffocating, rancid with rot, and in the corner, on a filthy straw mattress, lay a figure. At first, they weren't sure if it was even human. It was Blanche Monnier, naked, skeletal, her body wasted to little more than skin stretched over bone. Her hair hung in matted tangles, her eyes wide and terrified from the sudden light. She weighed barely 25 kilograms, less than 60 pounds. For a moment, silence filled the room. Even hardened officers struggled to comprehend what they were seeing. A woman, locked away for 25 years, hidden by her own family, surviving in unimaginable conditions. Blanche tried to speak, but her voice was faint, broken by decades of neglect. The only words she managed to whisper were a plea. "How beautiful the sun is." Even after Blanche's rescue, one haunting question remained. The anonymous note sent to the Paris Attorney General was the single act that shattered 25 years of silence. Without it, Blanche might have died in that locked room, forgotten forever, but the identity of the writer was never revealed. Some believed it was a neighbor, perhaps someone who had long suspected that the Monnier house was hiding a dark secret. Others suggested it may have been a distant relative, someone troubled by whispers within the family. Still others thought it could have been a former servant, finally breaking their silence after years of complicity. And then there was another theory, whispered but never proven. Some speculated that it might have been her brother, Marcel Monnier himself. An educated man, respected in Poitiers, he lived under the same roof and heard Blanche's cries. Perhaps, after decades, his conscience cracked under the weight of guilt. Perhaps he could no longer bear the burden of silence. But if he did help, why did he never admit it? Why did he remain publicly aligned with his domineering mother? Was he too afraid? Or too complicit to ever confess? The truth remains buried. Alongside these mysteries came even darker rumors. Some whispered that Blanche had suffered worse than neglect, that she had been abused, even raped, by her brother during her imprisonment. These claims spread quickly in the public imagination, fueling the horror of her ordeal. Historians today agree Blanche's suffering was already beyond comprehension: starvation, isolation, dehumanization, without adding crimes that were never proven. Still, the fact that such rumors existed speaks volumes. To many, the idea that a family could lock away their own daughter for 25 years was already so monstrous, it seemed impossible it could end there. The anonymous letter, the silence of her brother, the whispers of unspeakable abuse, these unanswered questions linger even more than a century later. Blanche had been freed from her prison, but the truth about those who kept her there was, and still is, shrouded in shadows. The discovery of Blanche Monnier shook France to its core. Newspapers called it the Affair of Poitiers. Across the country, people struggled to imagine how a respected, aristocratic family could commit such cruelty, not in secret dungeons or remote prisons, but in the heart of a respectable home. Crowds gathered outside the Monnier residence, hurling insults, stones, and curses. The family, once admired, had become despised overnight. Madame Louise Monnier, Blanche's mother, was immediately arrested. But fate intervened quickly. Only 15 days later, she died in prison. Some say it was illness, others believed the shame and public fury broke her spirit. She never faced trial. That left Marcel Monnier, Blanche's brother. He was charged as her jailer and accomplice. In court, Marcel tried to defend himself. He claimed he was powerless, that his mother was a tyrant and he could not stand against her. He insisted he had wanted to help Blanche, but fear and loyalty to family honor kept him silent. But the evidence was clear. He had lived in the same house, heard her cries, seen her condition, and done nothing for 25 years. At first, the court convicted him, sentencing him to 15 months in prison. But shockingly, on appeal, Marcel was acquitted. The judges ruled that while morally guilty, he had broken no law the court could prove. This decision outraged the public. To many, it felt like a betrayal of Blanche, proof that family honor and social class still carried more weight than justice. And as the court case closed, the scandal slowly faded from headlines. But for Blanche Monnier, the nightmare never truly ended. After her rescue in 1901, doctors and nurses in Poitiers struggled to save her frail body. They bathed her, fed her carefully, and nursed her broken health. Slowly, she regained some strength, but no medicine could return the decades that had been stolen. Her once bright spirit remained trapped in the past. Time for Blanche had stopped the day she was locked away. She spoke little of her family, little of her suffering. But when she did, it was often about the man she had loved. The lawyer who had treated her with kindness and dignity. The man she had once dreamed of marrying. By then, he was long dead. Yet Blanche never forgot him. Nurses recalled her quietly asking about him or speaking his name with a faint, broken tenderness. One attendant remembered her whispering, almost like a prayer, "Does he think I abandoned him?" It was a question without an answer, and a wound that never healed. She never returned to her family home. Instead, she spent the rest of her life in the care of institutions, living quietly, withdrawn, her days marked by silence and sorrow. In 1913, just 12 years after her discovery, Blanche Monnier died at the age of 64. Her passing was quiet, unremarkable, but her story had already made her a symbol. Known as La Séquestrée de Poitiers, the sequestered woman of Poitiers, Blanche became a haunting reminder of the cruelty that can hide behind wealth and respectability. Her ordeal shocked France, forcing society to confront the dangers of blind obedience to family honor and the silence that allows abuse to thrive. More than a century later, Blanche's name endures. Her story remains a warning that monsters are not always strangers lurking in shadows. Sometimes they are family, hidden behind closed doors, protected by reputation, and shielded by silence. Before we close, if stories like this move you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us uncover and bring more hidden chapters of history into the light. The story of Blanche Monnier is more than a dark tale from the past. It is a warning about silence, power, and the cruelty that can hide behind respectability. For 25 years, she was erased by her own family, locked in darkness while the world outside moved on. Neighbors gossiped, but never questioned. Even her own brother stayed silent, valuing obedience over compassion. Her rescue did not come from family loyalty, but from one anonymous letter, proof that sometimes one voice is enough to break the silence. And that leaves us with a haunting question. How many lives remain trapped today, unseen, because no one dares to speak? Blanche Monnier's name endures as La Séquestrée de Poitiers. Her suffering cannot be undone, but her story reminds us that cruelty often hides in plain sight, and courage begins with speaking out.